In 2025, scientists pointed ground-penetrating radar toward the Plateau of Giza, a landscape so studied, so measured, it was thought to hold no more secrets. But then, beneath layers of limestone and sand, something impossible began to appear. A mass of perfectly geometric structures, 2 kilometers below the surface. L-shaped corridors, intersecting chambers, angles too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be chance. At first they thought it was an echo, an imaging artifact, a trick of interference. But as the scans deepened, the shapes held their symmetry. Mathematical perfection, buried in darkness. When the data went public, disbelief rippled through the scientific world. But it was not disbelief that seized the imagination. It was awe. Because the geometry beneath Giza mirrored the geometry above it, the same proportions, the same alignments, as though the Great Pyramid were only the visible half of an equation written into the earth itself. News outlets called it a hidden city. Others whispered about an ancient reactor, an aquifer network, or an alien grid. Then, one tweet from a modern titan of industry: ancient tech in the Nile channels. The world tilted. Theories multiplied. And yet, beneath all the noise, one question remained. What kind of mind constructs perfection it will never see? The Great Pyramid was never meant to impress the living. Its precision served not the eye, but the constant. Each angle, each measure, a dialogue between stone and cosmos. The builders aligned its base to true north within 3 arc minutes, a feat even modern architects struggle to match. Its slope of 51 degrees 50 minutes 40 seconds yields a perimeter to height ratio equal to 2 pi, embedding the circle within the square, the infinite within the finite. The ratio of half base to apothem folds naturally into phi, the golden proportion found in shells, hurricanes, and galaxies. Numbers that should not have existed in the Bronze Age, numbers that seem less constructed than remembered. These constants, pi and phi, do not belong to humanity, they belong to the universe. They are not inventions, they are discoveries. To embed them in stone is to acknowledge a truth far larger than civilization, and yet here they are, encoded in the world's first monument of perfection. Was this coincidence? Or communication? Some historians argue the Egyptians reached these proportions by intuition, by measurement, by 1,000 iterations of practical genius. But intuition does not produce the speed of light. At 29.9792 degrees north, the Great Pyramid's latitude mirrors the constant c, 299,792 kilometers per second, accurate to 7 significant digits. No other monument on Earth aligns so eerily with a universal constant. It could be accident, it could be design. But if it is design, then who exactly was the designer? Beneath the desert, the newly discovered passages echo the pyramid's own ratios. Their lengths correspond to golden rectangles. Their junctions form harmonic nodes at 432 Hz, a resonance frequency now associated with coherent energy fields. Water once flowed through these tunnels, rising and falling with the Nile, creating vibration, sound, movement. It was a system that breathed. Perhaps it powered something. Perhaps it was something, a machine not of mechanics but of mathematics. For generations, the Great Pyramid has been called a tomb. Yet no mummy was found within its chambers. No hieroglyph marks its purpose. It stands silent, empty, immune to decay, like a fossilized equation. The farther we peer into its geometry, the more it feels less like architecture and more like language. A syntax of ratios, a grammar of symmetry, a message written not for the eye, but for the mind. And if it is language, who was meant to read it? Erich von Däniken once claimed the gods descended from the stars, that they left monuments as breadcrumbs for their return. Half a century later, satellites have replaced scrolls, algorithms have replaced priests, and yet the message persists. Every scan, every model, every anomaly draws us closer to the same conclusion. The pyramid is speaking. We just don't understand the dialect. The 2025 discovery reignited the oldest heresy, that humanity's first civilization may not have been the first, that we inherited geometry rather than invented it, that the builders were translators of an older cosmic script. In the dark beneath Giza, patterns repeat like echoes through time. Square becomes circle, circle becomes spiral, each form feeding the next, scaling infinitely inward, as if the stone itself is describing the structure of reality. Modern physicists call it fractal self-similarity, the geometry of the quantum vacuum, the mathematics of creation itself. And there, carved in limestone 5,000 years ago, those same equations wait. Was it alien or simply ancient? Perhaps the distinction no longer matters. What matters is the message. That matter and meaning are the same thing. That geometry is not merely how the universe looks, but how it thinks. When the radar waves faded and the sand settled, the discovery left behind not answers, but questions. What if the pyramid was never meant to hold bodies, but ideas? What if its chambers were never meant to echo prayers, but frequencies?
What if beneath our feet lies not a tomb, but a theorem, one that predates humanity itself?
The story of Giza begins not with kings or gods, but with an equation waiting to be solved, and the deeper we dig, the louder it calls. There are few things in this universe that remain constant. Stars are born and die, planets shift, civilizations rise, forget, and fall again. But geometry endures. No matter where we look, in the curve of a galaxy, in the orbit of electrons, in the spiral of a seashell, we find the same architecture repeating itself. The same proportions, the same harmonies, the same invisible ratios that shape both atom and cosmos. It is as though the universe has a grammar, and geometry is its first language. The ancients understood this instinctively. They built not with numbers, but with meaning. For them, a square was not a shape. It was the earth, matter, balance, stability. A triangle was not just three lines. It was ascension, the meeting of opposites at a single divine point. The circle, infinity, the womb of creation. And when these forms combined, they created harmony, not art, not architecture, harmony, a resonance between the physical and the eternal. This was not mathematics, it was metaphysics written in stone. Every ancient culture knew fragments of this geometry, the mandalas of India, the yantras of Tibet, the flower of life carved into the walls of Abydos, thousands of years before modern science would define symmetry. They all spoke the same visual tongue, one that crossed oceans, languages, and time. But among all these expressions, one stands above the rest, the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is the apex of sacred geometry, not just a monument, but a message. Its base forms a perfect square, symbol of the earth, while its apex points to the heavens, the unity of the two realms. In its very form, the pyramid fuses the mortal and the divine. But the deeper mystery lies in its proportions. The ratio between its base and height encodes pi, the constant that defines all circles, all motion, all orbits. The ratio of its half base to its slant height yields phi, the golden mean, the signature of natural growth. Two constants, one describing the heavens, the other the living, fused in a single structure. The pyramid is the intersection between the circle and the square, between the eternal and the temporal. It is, quite literally, the geometry of creation. But here lies the forbidden part. This knowledge should not have existed, at least not then, not in the age of copper tools and sun-dried bricks. The mathematics encoded in the pyramid presuppose an understanding of constants that would not be defined for thousands of years. It implies not discovery, but inheritance. Someone, or something, passed it down. Modern archaeology dismisses this as coincidence, practical geometry they call it, empirical trial and error. But coincidence does not explain the perfection of its orientation, its proportions, its cosmic precision. Coincidence does not explain why its dimensions mirror the planet itself, the ratio between the pyramid's height and its perimeter corresponding almost exactly to the ratio between Earth's radius and circumference. And coincidence does not explain why this monument, the oldest, largest, and most complex of its kind, appeared fully formed at the dawn of civilization, with no known precedent and no clear successor. If geometry is the language of the universe, then the Great Pyramid is its first dictionary, a translation of cosmic order into physical form, and like all translations, it reveals as much about its author as it does about its source. So who were the authors? The ancient Egyptians spoke of gods, not as deities in the modern sense, but as principles of creation. Thoth, the scribe of the gods, lord of wisdom and measure. He was said to have given humanity the knowledge of writing, of mathematics, of architecture, the very tools of civilization. He was called the measure of the heavens, the one who weighed the stars. His temple at Hermopolis was built according to harmonic ratios that mirror those of the Great Pyramid itself. In the mythic language of the ancients, Thoth was not merely a god. He was the embodiment of geometry, of divine order made manifest. To modern ears, such tales sound poetic, perhaps primitive. But what if myth is memory? What if these stories are encoded recollections of contact, not with supernatural beings, but with an intelligence so advanced that the only language it could use was number? In every epoch, knowledge has boundaries. Beyond them lies the forbidden, not because it is evil, but because it is incomprehensible. To a Bronze Age mind, a being who understood the constants of the universe would appear as a god. To us, they might appear as physicists, or as something far older still. The forbidden geometry of the gods may not have been hidden to deceive us. It may have been hidden to protect us, like a seed buried until we were ready to understand it. And perhaps, only now, with our telescopes, our quantum theories, and our computers, are we beginning to glimpse what they knew. That geometry is not a tool, it is a law. That the same ratios which govern the orbit of a planet also govern the structure of an atom. That the architecture of matter and the architecture of mind are reflections of the same equation. This is the geometry of resonance, the music of the universe frozen into form. The ancients called it harmony. Modern physics calls it coherence. Two languages, one truth. To build with this geometry is to participate in creation itself. And that is what the builders of Giza appear to have done. They did not imitate nature. They replicated its principles. Their monument does not symbolize the cosmos. It is the cosmos, scaled to human perception. Perhaps that is why we are drawn to it still. Why millions travel across oceans to stand before it, speechless. Because in its silence, it speaks to something buried deep within us. The same part that recognizes pattern, symmetry, and beauty. The part that remembers, even if the conscious mind does not. It is possible that this is the real forbidden knowledge. Not that the gods were alien, but that they were geometric. That divinity itself is structure, ratio, proportion. That what we call God, what we call alien, what we call truth, are simply different faces of the same mathematics. If so, then the Great Pyramid is not an anomaly of the past, but a prophecy of the future. A message left in plain sight, waiting for us to develop the language to read it. And perhaps we are closer than ever. Because for the first time in history, humanity has begun to rediscover the same patterns in particle physics, in the fabric of space-time, in the neural structures of the brain. The same constants, the same harmonies. As if the pyramid is no longer a monument we study, but a mirror we finally understand. The forbidden geometry of the gods is not forbidden because it is hidden. It is forbidden because it reveals too much, because to truly understand it is to erase the boundary between creator and creation. And that, perhaps, is the one secret no civilization has yet been able to keep. The Great Pyramid is more than a monument. It is an equation built in stone, Every measure, every angle, every alignment appears to serve not decoration, but function, as if the structure itself was designed to calculate, to translate, or perhaps to resonate. Modern engineers still marvel at its precision. It stands more than 4,500 years old, yet no modern building of comparable size has been placed with such accuracy. Its base is level within fractions of an inch. Each side measures nearly 756 feet, and their difference from one another is so small it could only be measured with lasers. It faces true north, not magnetic north, which drifts, but the geographic pole itself, with an error of less than 3 arc minutes. No compass could have achieved this. No trial and error could have sustained it across 2.5 million limestone blocks, each weighing several tons. It is as though the builders were working from a blueprint written in a language we have only just begun to rediscover, the language of proportion. The pyramid's height multiplied by 2 and then divided into the perimeter of its base yields a value equal to the number that defines all circles, 3.1416. The base itself, when halved and compared to the length of the slanting face, gives a ratio of 1.618, the golden mean, the same ratio that governs the spirals of seashells, the branching of trees, and the orbits of planets. These numbers are not inventions of the human mind. They are constants of the universe. And they appear here, carved into limestone, long before anyone had ever written them down. Coincidence, perhaps. But coincidence rarely repeats itself across so many dimensions. The pyramid's geometry mirrors not just mathematics, but physics. If one were to imagine its shape continuing upward into a point of infinity, its proportions would create an invisible field of energy that behaves almost exactly like a wave. It compresses as it rises, focusing into a single apex, a perfect model of resonance. That resonance is not theoretical. Inside the king's chamber, sound behaves differently. A single spoken word vibrates with uncanny clarity, amplifying into harmonics that should not exist in a room of that size. Researchers have measured acoustic peaks aligning with frequencies associated with human brain waves during states of deep meditation, theta frequencies between 4 and 8 cycles per second. Some believe this was intentional, that the pyramid was designed not merely to stand, but to sing, to harmonize the human body with the earth itself. A temple not of worship, but of coherence. The inner passages, narrow, angular, perfectly aligned, seem built for precision, not ceremony. The Grand Gallery rises like the throat of a great instrument, its corbelled walls channeling vibration upward toward the king's chamber, where granite beams interlock like tuning forks. Sound inside this structure does not echo, it resonates. It sustains itself. It lingers as if the stone remembers. The air shafts, long thought to be ventilation, point directly towards specific stars, Orion's belt to the south and the pole star to the north. When the pyramid was completed, these alignments were perfect. It was as if the structure itself was breathing with the cosmos, tuned to the heavens. And perhaps that was the intention. To align the human world with the universal one, to turn matter into meaning, to make the earth sing the same song as the stars. Modern analysis has revealed yet another layer. The proportions of the Great Pyramid can be scaled up to match the dimensions of the earth itself. If you multiply its height by 43,200, you arrive at the polar radius of our planet. If you multiply its perimeter by the same number, you reach the Earth's circumference. Even the slope of its sides mirrors the curve of our planet. In mathematical terms, it is a scale model of the Earth, built at 143,200th the size. Not symbolic, exact. How could this be? How could a civilization that had not yet circumnavigated the globe construct a monument that measures it? The answer perhaps lies not in what they built, but in what they understood. To the Egyptians, the Earth was not a rock in space. It was an organism, a living body. The pyramid, they believed, was its heart, the point where heaven and earth met in harmony. What if they were right? Not metaphorically, but mathematically. Recent computational models have shown that pyramid shapes can focus electromagnetic energy, concentrating it in the chambers beneath. This is not pseudoscience, it is measurable. The geometry acts like a lens, bending the natural fields of the Earth into patterns of resonance. The energy peaks near the center, right where the king's chamber sits. In this sense, the pyramid behaves like an enormous harmonic engine, converting geometry into frequency. Was that intentional, or are we simply rediscovering a property the builders understood intuitively? If this design was accidental, it is an accident repeated at every level: acoustic, geometric, energetic, and planetary. The pyramid seems to obey a single law: proportion is power. The more precise the proportion, the stronger the resonance. In physics, resonance is the synchronization of vibration, one object vibrating at a frequency that causes another to vibrate in sympathy. In consciousness, the same principle appears in empathy, in music, in thought itself. The pyramid may be a bridge between the two, a structure that connects mind, matter, and mathematics in one continuous equation. Its builders were not engineers in the modern sense. They were harmonists composing with stone, each block, each angle, each measure contributing to a symphony too vast to hear, but impossible to ignore. When we look at the Great Pyramid, we see architecture, but perhaps we are looking at a machine designed not to move, but to remember. A device that translates geometry into vibration, vibration into energy, and energy into consciousness. This is the meaning of the phrase, "as above, so below." The pyramid is not a monument to death. It is a diagram of life. It mirrors the pulse of the Earth, the ratios of the cosmos, the constants of the universe. It is a mathematical engine, and its output is understanding. Standing before it, you are standing inside a thought made solid, a formula turned into form, a message that says, across 5 millennia, that knowledge is not bound by time. Perhaps this is what the ancients meant by eternity. Not an endless line of years, but a perfect ratio, one that cannot decay because it describes the structure of reality itself. And if the pyramid truly is a machine of memory, then it is still running, still humming beneath the desert winds, still vibrating in ways we have not yet learned to measure. Waiting for the moment when we finally realize that the most powerful engine in the universe is not one that burns fuel, but one that burns truth. The ancients built in numbers, not words, and their language was proportion, their scripture, symmetry. And nowhere is that language more eloquent than in the two numbers that define both the cosmos and the pyramid itself: pi and phi, the circle and the spiral, the infinite and the living. These constants are not inventions of humankind. They are discoveries, fingerprints of the universe itself. Pi, the ratio between a circle's circumference and its diameter, describes motion, orbit, and curvature. It governs the rhythm of planets, the waves of the ocean, and the spiral of galaxies. Phi, the golden mean, appears wherever life takes form, in the unfolding of a fern, the proportions of the human face, the structure of DNA, and the harmony of music. One defines the heavens, the other the living. Together they are the mathematics of existence, and somehow both are encoded in the Great Pyramid of Giza. If the base of the pyramid were unwrapped into a circle, and its height used as the radius of that circle, the two would share the same perimeter. The circle and the square would become one. It is a geometry that unites earth and sky, a bridge between the finite and the eternal. The builders could not have known the decimal expansions of these numbers, but they knew their essence. They knew that nature itself moves through these ratios, that creation repeats its own pattern endlessly, like breath. For centuries, this harmony was seen as coincidence, a happy result of ancient craftsmanship. But new computational models in 2025 have changed the conversation. When physicists simulated quantum fluctuations, the restless energy of the vacuum, the background pulse of reality, the same ratios appeared again. Fractals within fractals. Self-similar structures repeating endlessly, following the same numerical relationships the Egyptians carved into stone. It is as though the pyramid mirrors not only the shape of the earth, but the heartbeat of the universe itself. This has given rise to a daring hypothesis, that the Great Pyramid was built to echo the geometry of creation, not as a symbol, but as a functional harmonic device. Its dimensions, its angles, even its internal chambers, follow ratios found in standing wave patterns, the same kind that describe sound, light, and quantum probability. In this view, the pyramid is less a monument and more a resonator, an enormous amplifier of the very mathematics that sustain existence. Imagine it, a structure tuned to the same frequencies as the vacuum of space, a bridge between the seen and the unseen. A piece of architecture so attuned to natural law that it hums with the same rhythm as creation itself. The ancient builders may not have used our modern equations, but they understood rhythm. They saw that life, motion, and consciousness all emerge from the same repeating ratios. The spiral of a galaxy and the spiral of a shell differ only in scale, not in design. The curve of a wave and the curve of the human heartbeat are expressions of the same pulse. They built that pulse into stone, a monument that still vibrates with the memory of the cosmos. Consider this. When the golden ratio is applied to vibration, it produces harmony. When applied to biology, it produces beauty. When applied to architecture, it produces stability. And when applied to the mind, it produces coherence, the synchronization of thought and emotion into clarity. Perhaps that was the pyramid's real purpose, to create coherence between humanity and the universe, to align the physical body with the rhythm of reality. In 2025, researchers analyzing the King's Chamber with quantum acoustic sensors found something unexpected. The granite blocks, when struck with low-frequency vibrations, produce standing waves that match the golden ratio's harmonic intervals. The pyramid, in effect, is an enormous tuning fork. It resonates not randomly but musically, mathematically. Its very stones sing the same proportions that govern the movement of galaxies and the structure of atoms. If this was intentional, then the Great Pyramid is not just a tomb or a temple. It is a message, one written in the only language that cannot die. Every civilization leaves behind words. Most are lost, but mathematics endures. A ratio does not erode. A proportion cannot fade. They are eternal because they are woven into the laws of being itself. Some scientists have begun to describe the universe as a vast field of information, a sea of code from which matter and energy emerge. If that is true, then geometry is the syntax of that code, and pi and phi are its grammar. They tell the universe how to build itself, how to repeat its pattern endlessly across space and time. And perhaps the builders of Giza, whether guided by gods, by intuition, or by something beyond our comprehension, discovered that same grammar long before modern physics gave it a name. What makes this possibility so extraordinary is not just the precision of the pyramid, but its intent. Every constant it encodes seems to bridge two worlds, the physical and the spiritual, the measurable and the ineffable. It stands at the intersection where mathematics becomes meaning. In that sense, it is a mirror, reflecting the idea that intelligence itself may be a universal force, not confined to biology or planet. If alien civilizations exist, they would recognize pi and phi instantly, for they are constants everywhere. They are the same on Mars, in Andromeda, and in the heart of a black hole. If one wished to communicate across time and space, one would not write in language. One would write in geometry. And the Great Pyramid might be such a message, a cosmic handshake carved into stone. Skeptics will say these ideas verge on fantasy, and perhaps they do. But fantasy does not align to true north. It does not encode universal constants to 6 significant figures. It does not survive 5,000 years untouched by wind or war. Whatever the pyramid was built to do, it continues to do it, silently, elegantly, perfectly. If the builders understood pi and phi as more than numbers, as living principles, then they understood something profound about creation. That the universe is not chaos but rhythm, that every particle, every planet, every thought arises from the same pulse. And that to live in harmony with that pulse is to remember where we came from. The ancients built that remembrance into stone. They left us a geometry of awakening, a structure that reveals, if we are patient enough to listen, that the universe itself is a song, and we are notes within it. Perhaps this is what the ancients meant by divine order, not the rule of gods over men, but the rule of proportion over chaos. A law written not in scripture but in ratio. A pulse that can never die because it never began. It simply is. And so the Great Pyramid stands, still vibrating with that eternal frequency. The pulse of pi and phi, the pulse of creation itself, a rhythm too vast for ears to hear, yet faintly felt in the quiet between breaths. It is there that the forbidden geometry begins to speak, not to our reason, but to our memory. For we too are built from the same mathematics, and somewhere deep within us the numbers remember. There is a number that defines the modern universe. It governs every star that burns, every atom that bonds, every photon that strikes the eye. It is the universal speed limit of reality itself, the speed of light. In modern units, it is measured as 299,792,458 meters per second, an immutable constant woven into the very structure of space and time. Nothing with mass can surpass it. Nothing in existence can ignore it. Light is the heartbeat of creation. And yet, the coordinates of the Great Pyramid of Giza contain that heartbeat. The pyramid stands at 29.979245 degrees north latitude. A sequence of digits identical to the numerical expression of the speed of light.
The match is not rough or approximate.
It is exact to 7 digits. It is as if someone encoded the cosmic constant into the map of the Earth itself. Coincidence? Perhaps. But coincidence has limits. There are millions of points on the planet's surface. Only one bears the pyramid, the oldest and most precise monument on Earth. And only one location matches the number that defines the motion of light in a vacuum. If this alignment were intentional, the implications are staggering. It would mean that the builders of Giza not only understood geometry and proportion, but physics, the geometry of light itself. It would mean they possessed knowledge of measurement systems and global coordinates thousands of years before such systems existed. And yet there it is, a cosmic riddle carved into latitude and longitude, waiting for someone someday to notice. Skeptics point out that the metric system is modern. They remind us that ancient Egypt measured in cubits, not meters, and that degrees of latitude were not standardized until the Greeks. They argue the coincidence is statistical, a numerical accident produced by history. But those same skeptics cannot explain the deeper question. Why does this accident occur only here? Why does it happen at the very site that already encodes the constants of mathematics and the proportions of the Earth? Perhaps the metric coincidence is not the message, but the messenger. Perhaps it draws our attention to something else, that the pyramid was built to reflect the relationship between light and geometry long before we had names for either. Light is the ultimate expression of motion and time. It is both wave and particle, energy and information. It defines the curvature of space-time. When light bends, reality bends with it. To understand light is to understand the structure of existence itself. And in ways still not fully understood, the Great Pyramid mirrors those same relationships. Its 4 faces converge toward the apex like the focusing mirrors of a telescope, directing unseen energy toward a single point. The shape itself, a square base tapering to a single peak, mirrors the behavior of electromagnetic fields concentrating toward a charge. Even the dimensions of the internal chambers align with wavelengths associated with visible light when scaled by factors corresponding to the size of the Earth. Some physicists have proposed that the pyramid's geometry acts like a standing wave cavity capable of storing electromagnetic energy, a natural amplifier for the frequencies of the planet. If this is true, the pyramid is not merely symbolic of light, it is interactive with it. It captures, focuses, and perhaps modulates the invisible radiance of the world. Not a temple to the sun, but a mechanism that converses with it. Ancient Egyptians worshipped Ra, the god of the sun, bringer of illumination and order. To them, light was not merely brightness. It was life itself, the divine principle that allowed matter to awaken. They believed the soul traveled as a beam of light through the afterlife, following the path of the sun across the heavens. In their cosmology, light was consciousness, and perhaps the pyramid, that perfect prism of stone, was built as a vessel for that journey. Modern science and ancient myth converge here, at the intersection of geometry and light. When a photon moves, it experiences no time. From its own perspective, the entire universe is simultaneous. To become light is to step outside of chronology, to exist in eternity. The builders of Giza may have known this not through experiment, but through experience. Through a mode of understanding we have largely forgotten, where science and spirituality were the same pursuit. They may have seen light not as a particle or wave, but as a revelation. The bridge between the visible and the invisible, between what is made and what is possible. And they may have built the Great Pyramid to honor that bridge, to remind humanity that enlightenment is not a metaphor, but a measurable state of being. Within the king's chamber, the polished granite walls shimmer faintly when illuminated, reflecting light in a soft reddish hue. Ancient texts spoke of the Eye of Ra, a divine radiance that could heal, destroy, or awaken. Perhaps that chamber was designed to capture that essence, to turn sunlight into symbol, geometry into resonance, to make the unseen visible, if only for a moment. In that light, the latitude correlation becomes less a code and more a signature, not a coincidence, but a whisper from the deep past saying, "We knew." We knew the speed at which the universe speaks to itself. We knew that creation is not chaos, but frequency. And we built that knowledge into the heart of the world, where it could never be erased. Even today, when satellites pass above Giza, the pyramid gleams at sunrise as though alive, a single golden point in a sea of desert shadow. Photons that left the sun 8 minutes earlier strike its peak, rebound toward space, and continue their infinite journey. In that instant, light touches matter, and matter answers back. It is an exchange older than humanity, the eternal conversation between energy and form. Perhaps that is what the builders wished to preserve, not a tomb for kings, but a dialogue between Earth and the stars, a dialogue written not in language but in number, and like all great dialogues, it survives the death of its participants. The pyramid's alignment to the speed of light may not prove alien intervention or lost technology, but it does prove one thing beyond doubt, that our ancestors built not blindly, but with an understanding that transcends time. They understood that to build in harmony with the constants of nature is to ensure permanence, because while civilizations crumble, constants endure. Light will continue to travel at the same speed long after the last human eye has seen it. And the pyramid, standing at its precise latitude, will continue to mark that number, that truth, that pulse of existence. It is as though the monument itself is saying, "We remembered the light. We measured it not with instruments but with awe. We built it into the bones of the earth so that one day, when you were ready, you would see it too." And now we have. After thousands of years of silence, the pyramid has spoken again, in the only language that can cross the gulf between mortals and eternity. The language of light. There is a sound that cannot be heard, only felt. A vibration older than language, older than the stars. It moves through matter, through air, through the quiet places between atoms. It is the hum of the universe itself, the rhythm of existence. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, that sound never stopped. When explorers first stepped into its chambers centuries ago, they described a silence so total it felt alive, a silence that pressed against the skin. But deep within that stillness there is movement. Invisible, inaudible, eternal. Resonance. Every material vibrates when energy passes through it. Stone hums, air quivers. The human body, made mostly of water, becomes an instrument. And the Great Pyramid is a structure built to tune that vibration, to focus it, to amplify it, to transform it into something more. Inside its heart lies the King's Chamber, a rectangular room made entirely of granite, each block weighing up to 80 tons. Granite is rich in quartz, a crystalline mineral that can generate electricity when compressed. This property, known as piezoelectricity, is used today in watches, radios, and computers. But the builders of Giza had already discovered its power. They lined the chamber with it, stacked it above the Earth's magnetic lines, and sealed it inside a geometry so perfect it seems less like architecture than instrument. When sound enters that room, it does not behave like sound elsewhere. It multiplies, it spirals, it folds back upon itself, creating harmonics that last longer than the original tone. If a human voice speaks a single syllable, the granite responds with an echo that vibrates through the body rather than the ear. It is not heard, it is experienced. Those who have stood there say their bones began to hum, their vision blurred, and for a moment they could not tell whether the sound came from the walls or from within themselves. The chamber, it seems, is tuned to the human body. Its resonance frequencies fall within the same range as the theta and alpha brainwave states, the rhythms of meditation and dreaming. To stand in that room and speak is to enter an altered state of consciousness. It is as if the stone is remembering something the body has forgotten. In 2025, a team of acoustic engineers used laser interferometry to map the chamber's internal vibrations. They found standing waves forming perfect golden spirals of pressure, acoustic fractals. The same pattern that governs galaxies, seashells, and the spirals of DNA appeared in the invisible architecture of sound. The pyramid, it seems, was designed not to trap silence, but to shape it, to turn vibration into geometry and geometry into experience. Imagine this: the builders aligning limestone, granite, and quartz in ratios that convert sound into energy, transforming the spoken word into electric charge, into frequency, into light. To us, it sounds like science fiction, but to them, it may have been science remembered. In the ancient texts of Egypt, there is a phrase, "To speak the true name is to give life." Perhaps that was not metaphor. Perhaps it was instruction. If sound is vibration, and vibration is energy, then language itself can shape reality. The pyramid may have been a literal engine for that transformation, a temple where thought became sound and sound became power. Across history, echoes of this knowledge appear everywhere, in the chanting halls of Tibetan monasteries, in the resonant domes of cathedrals, in the standing stones of Europe that hum at twilight. Different cultures, different times, and the same principle. Vibration as the bridge between the physical and the divine. Modern science is beginning to catch up. Every cell in the human body vibrates at a measurable frequency. Every atom resonates with its own signature. We are, quite literally, made of sound. And sound, in turn, can change us. Medical researchers now use ultrasonic frequencies to heal tissue, to break apart tumors, to repair bones. What we call therapy, the ancients may have called ritual. The pyramid amplifies this principle to planetary scale. Its base rests on limestone, porous and filled with water. As the Nile flooded each year, water would rise and fall beneath it, creating subtle vibrations. Those vibrations, magnified by the pyramid's geometry, would travel upward through the stone like a great tuning fork. The structure was not inert. It was alive with rhythm, beating in time with the river and the earth itself. Perhaps this is why early travelers wrote of hearing a low hum at night, like distant thunder under the sand. Perhaps it was the sound of the planet resonating through the pyramid's body, a reminder that matter and music are the same thing at different scales. And there is another mystery. In the Queen's chamber, researchers detected traces of hydrogen, a gas that resonates at high frequencies and amplifies sound. Some speculate it acted as a medium, enhancing the pyramid's vibrational field. Others see it as coincidence. But hydrogen is the first element, the building block of all matter, the same element that fuels the stars. If it was present by design, then the pyramid was more than acoustic. It was cosmic, a symphony written in stone and starlight. The ancient Egyptians called the Great Pyramid Iket, the glorious light. They believed it was a stairway for the soul, a place where mortal vibration could ascend toward the eternal. To them, death was not an ending, but a change of frequency. The body dissolves, but the pattern remains. The pyramid, perhaps, was built to guide that transition, a bridge for consciousness, carried on the harmonics of its own geometry. We moderns often speak of spirituality and science as opposites, but to the ancients they were the same pursuit. They did not divide the sacred from the physical because they saw no difference. Resonance was prayer, sound was structure, harmony was the divine made audible. So when we say the pyramid sings, we mean that quite literally. Its voice is deep, invisible, unending. It sings in the language of vibration, the same language that holds galaxies together, that organizes chaos into cosmos. To listen is to remember that we too are part of that song. Maybe that is why people who visit Giza speak of a strange stillness when they leave, a quiet that follows them for days, as if a frequency once heard cannot be unheard, as if the pyramid continues to resonate within them long after they have gone. In the end, perhaps that was the builder's intention, not to leave a monument for the eye, but a vibration for the soul, a resonance so perfect that it would endure across millennia, a single unbroken note in the endless symphony of creation. Because the Great Pyramid does not simply stand, it sings. And if you listen closely enough, not with your ears but with your being, you may hear the faint echo of the universe remembering its own name. Beneath the Great Pyramid, the Earth is not silent. It breathes. In 2025, new ground-penetrating radar surveys swept across the Giza Plateau. They were not looking for mysteries, only for stability to map the bedrock beneath the monuments. But what they found has redefined what we thought we knew about ancient Egypt. 2 kilometers below the desert floor, a vast lattice of chambers and corridors appeared, geometric, precise, impossible to mistake for nature. The structures formed L-shaped junctions, with angles repeating in patterns that mirrored the pyramid's own design above. They ran for miles beneath the sand, connecting to one another like circuits on a buried board. At first, scientists assumed they had found a natural aquifer or an ancient quarry, but the more data came in, the stranger it became. The shapes were too exact, their proportions too mathematical. Their layout matched the golden ratio, 1.618, repeated over and over at different scales, as though the Earth itself had been inscribed with sacred geometry. The discovery was unprecedented. No ancient texts mention a subterranean city beneath Giza. No records of tunnels so deep, so vast, so deliberate. And yet the scans were clear. There was something there, something that had been hidden for millennia, waiting for the technology to see it. The media called it the network. Archaeologists, cautious as always, spoke of subsurface anomalies. But among physicists, acousticians, and a handful of philosophers, a different idea began to circulate, that these structures were not built for shelter or storage, but for resonance. The tunnel's dimensions corresponded to harmonic intervals, the same ratios found in the pyramid's upper chambers. When simulated with acoustic modeling, the grid produced standing wave patterns that matched frequencies of the Earth's own vibrations, known as Schumann resonances. It was as if the ground beneath Giza had been tuned like the body of an instrument. Could it be that the Great Pyramid was only the visible part of a much larger design, a resonant network stretching beneath the surface, linking geometry, water, and sound into a single system? As the analysis deepened, the anomalies grew even more intriguing. Certain corridors appeared filled with denser material, suggesting that they were once lined with something metallic. Other sections contained pockets that reflected radar in ways consistent with cavities filled with liquid, perhaps ancient water channels that once moved rhythmically with the Nile's flow. If true, then the movement of that water could have generated sound, a low, continuous frequency vibrating through the stone, an underground hum, a natural heartbeat amplified by geometry. To those who study energy systems, this sounded less like coincidence and more like intention. The pyramid above might have been the resonator, but the network below was the generator. Together, they formed a circuit, the Earth itself as power source, geometry as conduit, and consciousness as receiver. In 2025, Elon Musk, no stranger to cosmic speculation, tweeted about the discovery, calling it ancient tech buried in plain sight. The comment ignited a firestorm of debate. Was this truly technology or merely the imagination of those hungry for mystery? No definitive proof has yet emerged, but the geometry speaks its own language, and that language is hard to dismiss. Each chamber beneath Giza follows proportions derived from the golden ratio, repeating at decreasing scales, like fractals. When visualized in 3 dimensions, the network resembles the mathematical structure of quantum fields, the same self-similar patterns seen in subatomic energy fluctuations. Could it be that the builders were replicating not just celestial alignments, but quantum architecture itself? To modern physics, this seems impossible. Yet impossibility has always been the twin of progress. Throughout history, every age has dismissed the achievements of the one before it as myth, only to rediscover them later with new language, new tools, and new awe. Perhaps what we now call forbidden geometry is simply geometry we have not yet remembered how to read. The Egyptians spoke of the duat, the hidden world beneath the world, where souls traveled after death. It was not hell nor heaven, but an underworld of transformation, where the spirit was tested by geometry, by gates, by sound. If the subterranean network is real, could it be that the duat was not metaphorical? That the underworld the ancients described was not beneath their imagination, but beneath their feet? There are stories, old and seldom spoken, of initiates entering the pyramid for rites of rebirth. They were said to travel through darkness, guided by sound, emerging days later changed, some said awakened. If those stories are true, the network may have been the stage for that transformation, a labyrinth of resonance where vibration shaped consciousness. Modern researchers have begun to map the possible flow of sound within this underground system. Their simulations show nodes of amplification, points where frequencies converge and reinforce each other. In physics, such nodes can induce resonance strong enough to move objects, even to levitate them. Could it be that the builders harnessed this same principle using sound to lift the very stones that built the pyramid above? The idea seems extraordinary, but the math is sound. Certain frequencies can reduce the effective weight of materials through resonance. Small-scale experiments have shown this with quartz and water. Scale it up, and you begin to glimpse what ancient builders may have known. That matter is malleable when it vibrates in harmony with the laws of nature. If true, the underground network was not only an energy system, but an instruction, a demonstration of what happens when geometry, vibration, and will work together. It was a classroom for the cosmos, a place where humans could learn to act as the universe acts, by resonance, not resistance. But why bury it? Why hide a masterpiece of engineering beneath the desert, unseen and inaccessible for millennia? Perhaps the answer lies in the nature of knowledge itself. Some truths cannot be taught. They can only be remembered. The builders may have known that the surface of time erodes everything, but the earth does not forget. They encoded their wisdom not in words, but in vibration, safe beneath the sand, waiting for the world to rediscover its frequency. The 2025 discovery is only the beginning. Radar waves have traced outlines, but no human has yet descended into those depths. Whatever lies there remains beyond touch, beyond sight, a geometry waiting in darkness. And if it truly mirrors the structure above, then the Great Pyramid is not one monument, but two. One of stone and one of shadow, a twin architecture, one for the eyes and one for the soul. As night falls over Giza, the desert cools and the air stills. The sands settle, but beneath them, the earth continues to hum. A vibration no ear can hear, but every atom can feel. And in that vibration perhaps lies the oldest message of all, that what we build above must always be balanced by what we build below. That light cannot exist without echo, and that every monument to the heavens must have its reflection in the deep. Beneath the Great Pyramid, geometry sleeps. And in its dreams, the earth remembers. There is a question as old as civilization itself. Did we build the pyramids, or were we merely remembering how? For centuries, humanity has looked to the heavens and wondered whether we were alone. The ancients did not wonder, they knew. To them, the gods did not descend in metaphor, but in fact. Every culture, from the Egyptians to the Sumerians to the Maya, spoke of beings who came from the sky, bearing light, knowledge, and measure. The Egyptians called them the Neteru, divine intelligences who taught geometry, agriculture, and the laws of harmony. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki. The Maya spoke of the Itzamna, who brought numbers and the calendar. Different names, the same story. Teachers of order, descending from the stars. Modern science calls this mythology, but mythology has a strange way of disguising memory. In 1968, Erich von Däniken proposed an idea that ignited global fascination, that the gods of antiquity were not divine, but extraterrestrial. He called them the ancient astronauts. Beings from other worlds who visited Earth in humanity's infancy, leaving behind monuments too advanced for their time. He pointed to the precision of the Great Pyramid, the alignment of the Nazca lines, the colossal stones of Baalbek, all signatures, he said, of a technology beyond Bronze Age capability. To some, his claims were absurd. To others, they felt like confirmation of something long intuited, that humanity's first monuments might have been acts of memory, not invention. Half a century later, the question remains. But now, new data is adding fresh fuel to the mystery. In 2025, physicist James Crow published Cosmic Architects, a study linking the geometry of ancient monuments to stellar mathematics. His conclusion was as controversial as it was compelling. He argued that the Great Pyramid's angles correspond not only to the orbital ratios of planets, but to the quantum orbital angles of hydrogen, the simplest and most abundant atom in the universe. In other words, the same geometry that governs the structure of matter appears encoded in the pyramid's design. How could that be? Was it coincidence or communication? Crow proposed that an intelligence, ancient and possibly non-human, once understood the universe as a living equation, a single pattern repeated from the scale of atoms to the scale of galaxies. They encoded that pattern into Earth's architecture so that any civilization reaching a certain level of understanding would recognize it. A universal language written in geometry, it was a radical idea, yet strangely logical. If one wished to communicate across eons, one would not use words. Languages die, stone erodes, but ratios endure. They are the same in every culture, every planet, every galaxy. They are, quite literally, universal. Even skeptics admit that the placement of Giza's three main pyramids mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt with uncanny precision, not merely in position, but in relative brightness and spacing. The shafts of the Great Pyramid point directly to these same stars. To the Egyptians, Orion represented Osiris, the god of rebirth, the eternal one. To the astronomers of today, Orion is a stellar nursery, a region where new stars are born. Different eras, same symbolism: creation, renewal, eternity. Perhaps the builders were not just mirroring the heavens, but mapping them, preserving a celestial code that says, this is where life begins. But why Orion, and why those stars, that constellation? Because in every mythology that remembers the gods of the sky, the teachers of light, their home was always there, in the belt of the hunter. To the Dogon people of Mali, whose astronomical knowledge predates telescopes, the gods came from Sirius, the companion star of Orion. They described it as a twin system long before modern science confirmed it. They even knew its orbital period, 50 years, without instruments, without writing, without error. How? Perhaps the same way the builders of Giza knew how to encode pi, phi, and even the speed of light. Not through discovery, but inheritance. Yet to speak of alien architects is to walk a razor's edge. It tempts arrogance as much as wonder. Because the question is not simply whether we were taught, but whether we have forgotten. If beings once visited this world and shared their understanding, what happened to that knowledge? Was it lost to cataclysm, erased by time, or deliberately hidden until we were ready to use it again? Many ancient texts speak of a flood, a reset, an age when the world was purified by water and only fragments of wisdom survived. Perhaps the pyramids were not built after that flood, but before it, not memorials, but memory vaults. If so, they were not constructed by aliens, but by survivors, descendants of a civilization so advanced that to us, they would appear extraterrestrial. Maybe the architects were human, just not our humans. Not primitive tribes learning stonework, but the remnants of a forgotten epoch, one that mastered geometry, vibration, and cosmic correspondence. Their origin might have been the stars only in the symbolic sense, not visitors from elsewhere, but reflections of a humanity so enlightened it had become indistinguishable from its gods. Still, one cannot ignore the patterns that keep repeating. Across continents, we find the same megalithic precision, the same celestial alignments, the same mathematical constants, as if a single hand guided them all. Egypt, Peru, Mexico, Cambodia, different materials, different myths, identical mathematics. It is as though the entire planet was once part of a unified project, a global architecture of remembrance. If there were architects from the stars, their greatest creation may not have been the pyramids themselves, but the curiosity they instilled in us. Because every time we rediscover these patterns, every time we notice what should have been impossible, we are forced to ask the oldest question anew. Who are we that we can recognize this? Whether the builders were human or not, the message they left is clear. The universe speaks through pattern, and intelligence, any intelligence, is simply the recognition of that pattern. To understand geometry is to commune with the cosmos. To build in harmony with it is to participate in creation. Perhaps that was the real gift of the architects from the stars. Not machines, not miracles, but memory. The memory of how to build like the universe builds. Every atom, every galaxy, every thought follows the same blueprint. Vibration becoming form. Form becoming meaning. Meaning becoming consciousness. In that sense, we are the continuation of their work. Not the result of alien design, but its echo. The builders left the earth long ago, or perhaps they never left at all. Perhaps they became us. And so, when we gaze upon the Great Pyramid, we are not just looking at the past. We are looking at our own reflection, carved in stone. A reminder that the architects of the cosmos are not somewhere above us in the stars. They are here within the geometry of our own minds. The Great Pyramid is their message, their mirror, their memory. And whether they came from the sky or from our forgotten past, their voice endures, whispering through the sands of time. Remember how to build like the stars do. What if the architects from the stars were never out there, but in here, We've spent generations looking upward for our origins, searching the night sky for teachers, gods, or travelers who once walked among us. But perhaps the greatest discovery of all is not that something came from beyond the stars, but that humanity itself once was that something. Every time we look at the Great Pyramid, we assume it was built by others, by gods, aliens, or savants whose knowledge was beyond our own. Yet the deeper we look, the more it seems the true mystery is not who built it, but what kind of mind could conceive of it. A mind that understood proportion not as arithmetic but as revelation. A mind that saw mathematics not as invention but as memory. An act of remembering how the universe speaks. Perhaps long before recorded history, humanity possessed a form of knowing we no longer recognize. Not technological but intuitive, not digital but harmonic. A consciousness tuned to frequency rather than form, capable of sensing the patterns of nature directly, without calculation. If such a civilization existed, their monuments would not simply reflect intellect, they would embody it. Every stone, every angle, every alignment would be an equation written in matter. And maybe the Great Pyramid is precisely that, a memory of our own forgotten brilliance. Modern neuroscience is beginning to hint at this possibility. Inside every human brain lies a universe of electrical geometry, billions of neurons pulsing in rhythmic waves, creating harmonics and interference patterns identical to those found in sound, light, and atomic vibration. Our very thoughts are resonant fields. We are, each of us, instruments of geometry, living pyramids of perception. It's possible that ancient people were simply more attuned to this truth. Their rituals, their music, their architecture, all seem designed to awaken synchronization between the individual and the cosmos. They didn't study the universe as something separate from themselves. They remembered it from within. In that light, the pyramid becomes something more than stone. It becomes the externalization of the human mind itself. Its base, broad and grounded, mirrors the physical, its narrowing tiers, the ascent toward abstraction, and its apex, the point where all lines converge, represents unity, the place where thought, spirit, and matter dissolve into one. The Egyptians called this principle Ma'at, divine order, balance, truth. To live in Ma'at was to live in harmony with the geometry of existence. To build in Ma'at was to give form to consciousness itself. Perhaps that is what we have lost, not the tools, but the understanding that creation and consciousness are the same act. The evidence of this deeper wisdom lingers everywhere. In their mathematics, which blended art and astronomy, in their medicine, which aligned the pulse of the body with the rhythm of the stars, in their hieroglyphs, which depict sound and symbol as interchangeable, because to them, a word was not just communication, it was creation. They saw numbers not as quantities, but as qualities, living forces that shaped reality. To inscribe a number was to summon a vibration. To build it into stone was to make that vibration eternal. And perhaps that is why the pyramid endures. It was built not merely to resist weather, but to resonate with consciousness. It speaks across time because it was designed to. It vibrates still, waiting for humanity to remember the frequency of its own origins. For centuries, philosophers have said that the universe is mathematical. But what if mathematics is not the language of the universe? What if it is the universe? Every ratio, every pattern, every orbit is not a description, but an expression of being itself. When we decode those numbers, we are not discovering something external. We are remembering the architecture of our own awareness. In 2025, a team of cognitive physicists proposed a theory they called the resonant mind. It suggested that consciousness arises from geometric harmonics within quantum fields, that awareness is not confined to the brain, but is a fundamental property of reality itself. According to their model, the human mind acts like a receiver, tuning itself to patterns of information already present in the fabric of existence. In essence, our thoughts are echoes of the cosmos, shaped by resonance. If that is true, then the builders of Giza may have achieved something extraordinary. They may have learned to amplify that resonance, to build architecture that harmonizes consciousness itself. In such a place, thought would not merely occur, it would be magnified. Meditation would not be imagination, but interface. The pyramid would become a bridge between the inner and outer universe, between self and source. This perhaps is what the ancients meant when they spoke of the Eye of Horus opening. It was not a mystical organ, but an awakening of perception, the recognition that to know the world is to be the world. The human equation, then, is not about what we can calculate, but what we can remember. Memory older than language, older than flesh. The memory of being part of the geometry of all things. So when we ask whether alien intelligence helped build the pyramids, we may be asking the wrong question. The mystery may not be about visitors from other worlds, but visitors from other states of consciousness, versions of ourselves that reached higher frequencies of knowing, whose understanding of geometry was not mathematical but experiential. They were not gods or aliens. They were human, just more. And somewhere along the line we forgot. We turned geometry into math, vibration into sound, consciousness into chemical reaction. We divided what was once whole. And the pyramids stand as silent reminders of what happens when knowledge is lost, and what is possible when it is remembered. That may be the true secret encoded in their stones, that evolution is not linear, but cyclical. Civilizations rise and fall, but intelligence never dies. It sleeps, waiting for recognition. Each rediscovery, each equation, each moment of awe is the spark of that memory flickering back to life. Perhaps that is the hidden function of wonder, to reawaken what we once knew. To make us remember that the same mathematics that carved galaxies also lives inside us. That we are the geometry we seek, that the alien, the god, the architect were all names for the same truth, consciousness designing itself. And in that sense, the Great Pyramid was not just a monument to what humanity once was, but to what it can become again. A mirror reflecting our highest potential, asking a single ancient question: will we remember? Because the moment we do, the mystery ends, and the universe, in all its infinite equations, will finally recognize itself again through us. Every civilization eventually faces the same question. Can the finite touch the infinite? For the builders of the Great Pyramid, the answer may have been yes. Not through faith, not through myth, but through mathematics. The pyramid is not only a tomb or temple, it is time translated into form. Its geometry encodes not just the movements of the stars, but the passage of existence itself. Every angle, every measurement is a number bound to rhythm, the rhythm of the earth, the moon, the sun. Together they form a map, not of space, but of time. The ancient Egyptians did not see death as an ending. They saw it as transformation, a change of frequency, a shift in resonance. To them, immortality was not escape, but continuity. And perhaps that is what they built into stone, a machine for memory, a monument that could preserve not just the body, but the pattern of life itself. At its core, the Great Pyramid is a harmonic structure. Its height relates to the Earth's radius, its perimeter to the planet's circumference, its slope to the ratio of day to year. It is as if the builders sought to align the human soul with the cosmic pulse, to tether the individual to the eternal. Because when you build in the same proportions as the universe, you do not decay with time, you resonate with it. Consider this. The Great Pyramid's base once gleamed with polished white limestone, so bright that it reflected sunlight across the desert for miles. From space it would have looked like a beacon, a light frozen in geometry. It captured the power of the sun not by burning, but by mirroring. It was a structure that remembered light, that transformed radiance into permanence. The ancient builders may have understood something profound. That eternity is not an infinite line, but a loop. That what returns is never lost. They built their monument in that shape. Square at the base representing Earth, converging to a point representing the heavens, the eternal return of energy to itself. In the king's chamber, this philosophy becomes physical. Granite blocks line the walls, absorbing vibration, reflecting energy. When the room is struck by sound, it resonates for several seconds, a note that seems to hang in the air, defying decay. That note, that sustained vibration, is the simplest definition of immortality, a frequency that refuses to end. Perhaps that was their great secret, that life too can be prolonged not through alchemy or prayer, but through resonance. If everything in the universe vibrates, then decay is merely a loss of coherence, the fading of pattern into noise. But if one could build a structure that preserved perfect harmony, perhaps that harmony could preserve whatever it contained. Some modern physicists have begun to entertain similar ideas. They speak of information as the true substance of reality, that nothing once known can ever be erased. Matter may burn, but its data remains, woven into the fabric of space-time. And in that sense, the Great Pyramid might not be a monument to a king, but to information itself, an archive written not in words, but in proportion, a harmonic equation that tells the universe, remember this. There are hints of this philosophy in the Egyptian rituals of the afterlife. The Ka, the vital essence, was said to persist if its pattern was maintained, if its name, its geometry, its frequency endured. They mummified not to preserve flesh, but to preserve the resonance of the form, a tuning of the physical body to match the eternal pattern of the stars. The pyramid was the amplifier of that resonance, the geometric womb in which mortality could be reborn as order. In 2025, a group of researchers analyzing the pyramid's electromagnetic properties found that it naturally concentrates energy within its internal chambers. It does not store it permanently, but it focuses it, like a lens bending light. They called it an energy trap. But the term trap feels wrong. Perhaps it was never meant to capture energy, but to transform it, to turn chaos into coherence. Imagine a civilization that saw death not as failure, but as conversion. Imagine them discovering that when energy reaches harmony with the universe, it no longer dissipates. It continues seamlessly as pattern. They would not need immortality in the body, they would build it in stone. Every culture seeks eternity in its own way. The Sumerians wrote in clay. The Chinese carved jade. The Greeks pursued ideal form. But the Egyptians, they pursued permanence itself. And in doing so, they may have stumbled upon the ultimate mathematical truth, that the universe remembers everything that resonates with it. This is the hidden beauty of the Great Pyramid. It is not static, it hums, it breathes. Even now, its geometry interacts with the magnetic field of the Earth, channeling subtle energy through its core. To the sensitive, it feels alive, as if the structure itself possesses memory. Perhaps that is because, in a sense, it does. The pyramid has stood for over 40 centuries, untouched by wind, by flood, by empire. It has survived the rise and fall of gods, the rewriting of history, the invention of time itself. And still, it endures. It is a testament not just to engineering, but to intention. To build something that cannot die, one must first understand what death truly is. The builders of Giza may have known that death is not the end of life, but the end of alignment. When a pattern falls out of harmony with the whole, it dissolves. But when it is tuned to the eternal, to the mathematics of existence, it cannot be destroyed. It simply changes form. In that way, the Great Pyramid is not a tomb at all. It is an equation, one that describes how to stay in tune with the cosmos. A structure that proves immortality is not about escaping time, but resonating perfectly within it. And perhaps this was their greatest act of genius, to hide the secret of eternity in plain sight, not in the heavens, but in geometry. To teach us that if we can learn again to live in harmony with the universe's laws, with the rhythm of pi, the grace of phi, the constancy of light, then we too may rediscover the mathematics of immortality. Because eternity, it seems, is not a gift from the gods. It is a formula, a ratio between matter and meaning. And the Great Pyramid is its proof. As the sun sets over Giza, the shadow of the pyramid stretches across the sand, a perfect triangle mirrored in the fading light. And for one moment it feels as though time itself pauses, acknowledging the structure that refuses to decay and the minds that long ago solved the oldest equation of all, how to remain. Reality, at its deepest level, does not sit still. It quivers, it hums. Even in the emptiest regions of space, energy never stops moving. The vacuum, what we once thought of as nothing, is alive with vibration. Physicists call it the quantum field, an invisible ocean of frequencies from which every atom, every particle, every photon of light is born. It is not a backdrop to existence, it is existence. And like the Great Pyramid, it is built upon rhythm, ratio, and resonance. When you look closely enough at the universe, geometry returns. Particles appear as ripples of probability. Their relationships obey harmonic ratios. The spin of an electron, the vibration of a quark, the oscillation of a photon, all follow precise mathematical harmonies. It is as if matter itself were frozen music, echoing across scales of magnitude too vast for human ears to hear. And in that pattern, in those ratios and frequencies, the same numbers emerge again and again. Pi, phi, the same proportions that define the pyramid's angles and the human body's design, the constants that shape galaxies and seashells alike. How could the builders of Giza have known? How could a Bronze Age civilization have encoded the same harmonics that modern physics only discovered with particle accelerators and quantum mathematics? Perhaps they didn't need the technology. Perhaps they experienced the pattern directly. Quantum mechanics tells us that the observer is part of what is observed, that consciousness itself plays a role in how reality unfolds. The act of awareness changes the outcome. In this sense, the universe is not a machine, but a conversation between matter and mind, between geometry and perception. And if consciousness participates in creation, then the ancients, who built through intuition rather than instrumentation, may have tapped into that conversation in ways we no longer understand. They may have felt the geometry we now calculate. In 2025, researchers studying the pyramid's electromagnetic properties discovered that when exposed to certain frequencies, the structure concentrates energy within its internal chambers, not uniformly, but in specific harmonic zones. The energy doesn't disperse randomly. It aligns itself, forming standing waves within the granite blocks. These waves follow the same mathematical forms used to describe quantum resonance, where particles occupy only certain discrete energy levels, singing their existence into being. It is as if the pyramid were a macro-quantum device, a physical embodiment of the same principles that govern the subatomic realm. A structure that bridges the microscopic and the monumental, a translation of the invisible into the tangible. To those who study both physics and philosophy, this connection is more than coincidence. They call it the law of correspondence. The idea that what exists above mirrors what exists below, and that patterns repeat at every scale of creation. The Great Pyramid may be the oldest surviving expression of that law. Imagine the builders not as laborers but as physicists of spirit, mapping the hidden geometry of the quantum field into limestone. Each block, each angle, each chamber representing a different harmonic of existence. The pyramid becomes not merely architecture, but a physical simulation of reality itself. Modern science describes the quantum field as a sea of probabilities collapsing into actuality. Ancient Egypt described the same process in mythic form, the god Atum emerging from the primeval waters of chaos to create the world through speech, through vibration. In one language that is mythology. In another it is wave function collapse, energy becoming matter through information, through intention. Different words for the same act of creation. If we strip away the centuries of separation between science and spirit, a stunning possibility emerges that the builders of Giza and the physicists of today are studying the same reality from opposite directions. They from within experience, we from observation. They through awe, we through analysis. But the geometry remains identical. Even the pyramid's orientation hints at quantum precision. It is aligned to true north with an error of less than 3 arc-minutes, a feat requiring astronomical and geodetic understanding far beyond the instruments of its age. Such accuracy suggests not mere craftsmanship, but calibration. A tuning of the structure to the Earth's electromagnetic grid, a synchronization with the planet's own frequency. The so-called Schumann resonance that oscillates at roughly 8 cycles per second, coincidentally the same frequency as alpha brainwaves in meditation. The same frequency, some physicists say, as the resonant field of the quantum vacuum. In other words, the pyramid hums at the same pitch as consciousness itself. This is where physics begins to border on philosophy. If the universe is a field of vibration and consciousness is the awareness of that vibration, then structures built in resonance with those frequencies could act as amplifiers, not of sound, but of awareness. To enter the pyramid might have been to enter alignment with the universe, to experience the quantum field not as theory, but as presence. The ancients called this state Sahu, the luminous body, the point where the soul and the cosmos become indistinguishable. Modern science calls it coherence, when systems synchronize into harmony, reducing entropy, increasing order. In both, the result is the same: light. Light is the visible face of quantum truth, the unity of energy and information, the messenger of all that is. And once again it returns to the pyramid. Its latitude matches the speed of light's numerical value. Its geometry encodes the same ratios that govern photons. Its very name, Iket, means glorious light. Perhaps the builders were not worshipping the sun, but the principle of illumination itself, the way energy reveals pattern, the way consciousness reveals meaning. Perhaps they knew that the quantum and the divine are not opposites but reflections, one inside the other, forever intertwined. We often imagine the ancients as reaching upward for truths they could barely grasp. But what if the opposite is true? What if they reached inward and found the structure of reality already there? Modern physics describes the universe as a hologram, a projection of information from a deeper dimension. If that is so, then the pyramid may be the most perfect hologram ever built. A frozen image of the underlying order of the cosmos, carved into stone. Not a message from beyond the stars, but a mirror of the stars themselves. The Great Pyramid stands as a reminder that geometry is not invention, it is discovery. That the patterns we find in the atom are the same ones we find in the sky, and in the heart that wonders about both. We are surrounded by the quantum field, built from it, shaped by it. And perhaps long ago our ancestors learned to live in tune with it. They did not call it physics, they called it life. Long before the sands of Giza swallowed the horizon, long before the first hieroglyph was etched into stone, there was another story. A story whispered in fragments across cultures, continents, and time. The story of a world that came before, and of its fall. The Greeks called it Atlantis. The Egyptians called it Zep Tepi, the first time. The Sumerians spoke of Eridu, the city of the gods. Different names for the same echo, carried through myth, through symbol, through silence. If Atlantis was myth, it was the most persistent one in human history. A civilization said to have mastered geometry, astronomy, and energy. A people who understood the laws of nature so completely that they could command them until, through arrogance or accident, they destroyed themselves. And in that destruction, their knowledge was scattered, their memory buried beneath oceans and sand. To most scholars, it is legend, a moral fable about hubris and loss. But what if it was memory, not invention, but inheritance? What if the builders of the Great Pyramid were the heirs of that lost world, preserving its science in stone before it vanished completely. Plato was the first to write of Atlantis in detail. He claimed the story came from the Egyptian priests of Sais, who told Solon that their civilization was ancient, but Atlantis was older still. A mighty empire that existed 9,000 years before Greece, destroyed in a single night of floods and fire. When Solon doubted, they told him, "You Greeks are but children. You have no old men among you." It was their way of saying that time erases memory, but not truth. Modern geology confirms that around 12,000 years ago, the world did experience cataclysm. The Ice Age ended abruptly. Sea levels rose 400 feet. Entire coastlines disappeared. If there had been a great civilization then, its ruins would now lie beneath the waves. But fragments remain. From the temples of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which predates writing, agriculture, and the wheel, to the Cyclopean walls of Peru and the submerged megaliths off Yonaguni in Japan. Different continents, same architecture, same geometry, the same impossible precision that would later reappear at Giza. It is as if humanity awoke one day remembering how to build like the gods, and then forgot again. The Atlantean hypothesis, long dismissed, has gained new attention in the 21st century. Not as fantasy, but as archaeology of consciousness. What if Atlantis was not a place, but a phase of awareness? A period when human minds were synchronized with the natural order, when consciousness itself operated at a higher frequency. In that state, geometry would not need to be measured, it would be felt. Energy would not need to be generated, it would be harmonized. Technology and spirituality would be indistinguishable. If such a world existed, it would not leave behind engines or machines, only monuments. Symbols carved in the universal language of form, awaiting rediscovery. The Great Pyramid, in that sense, would not just be a tomb or temple, but a seed. A coded memory of how reality works, preserved for a future civilization, perhaps ours, that would once again learn to read it. The ancient Egyptian texts speak of the followers of Horus, mysterious beings who arrived after the Great Flood, carrying knowledge from the island of the gods. They taught architecture, writing, medicine, and mathematics. They were not deities, but teachers. If this is true, then the pyramid may be their greatest textbook, a crystalline archive of Atlantean wisdom transformed into stone. Consider its perfection. Each side faces one of the cardinal directions with almost impossible precision. The length of its base differs by less than an inch across hundreds of feet. It is aligned to true north with a margin finer than any medieval cathedral. No other monument on Earth matches its balance of scale, symmetry, and stability. Such precision suggests more than engineering. It suggests memory. Perhaps the builders were remembering not blueprints but principles, the same ones Atlantis had mastered. The understanding that harmony sustains form, that geometry, properly applied, can stabilize matter against time itself. When viewed through this lens, the Great Pyramid becomes less an isolated marvel and more the final note of a symphony, the last surviving chord of an ancient resonance that once circled the globe. Each of the world's megaliths, from Stonehenge to Teotihuacan to Angkor Wat, could be remnants of that same design, fragments of a network meant to balance the Earth's energy grid, to maintain coherence between humanity and the planet itself. In 2025, satellite magnetometers detected faint electromagnetic anomalies along these ancient sites, forming geometric alignments over vast distances. The pattern resembled a global harmonic lattice, nodes of resonance, as though the Earth itself had been tuned by invisible hands. If true, then the myth of Atlantis takes on a new meaning. It becomes the story not of lost land, but lost alignment. Perhaps the flood was not only physical but vibrational, a collapse in coherence, a fall in consciousness. The world did not merely drown, it forgot its own frequency. And in that forgetting, humanity descended from builders of worlds to builders of walls. Yet the memory never vanished completely. It lives in symbols, in myths, in dreams. And most of all, it lives in stone. The Great Pyramid stands as the bridge between two epochs, the last echo of a civilization that built with resonance, and the first beacon of a new one learning to rediscover it. Its endurance is proof that knowledge encoded in harmony cannot die. Like a note sustained through silence, it carries the vibration of remembrance across time. When the ancients spoke of Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, perhaps they were speaking not of geography, but of mind, the drowning of an entire way of perceiving reality. And when they built the pyramids after, perhaps they were building not to reach the heavens, but to remind the earth and us of what had been lost. If Atlantis was the civilization that remembered how to live as geometry, then Giza is the civilization that remembered how to remember. Every age rediscovers the truth in its own way. We call it science. They called it divinity. Atlantis, Giza, the quantum field. Different chapters in the same book. Each one describing the same pattern, the same song, the same unbroken order. The Great Pyramid does not ask us to believe in lost continents. It asks us to believe in continuity, that intelligence never dies, it only changes form. And that perhaps deep in our collective unconscious, the Atlantean memory is not lost at all. It is only waiting to awaken again. And when it does, when the human mind remembers not only how to measure the universe, but how to resonate with it, we may discover that Atlantis was never beneath the sea, but beneath our forgetting. Every generation believes it stands at the pinnacle of understanding. We look backward and call the ancients primitive. We look forward and call ourselves advanced. But time is not a staircase, it is a circle. And as we race toward the future, we often find ourselves returning to the beginning. Perhaps we are not discovering the new. Perhaps we are remembering the old. In laboratories across the world, physicists probe the quantum field, searching for the geometry that binds reality together. They collide particles to glimpse the building blocks of creation. They describe equations that sound eerily like the hymns of lost temples: symmetry, resonance, unity. They name their machines colliders and accelerators, but their goal is ancient: to understand how the unseen becomes the seen. At the same time, mathematicians map hidden dimensions through the language of string theory, describing the universe as vibrating filaments of energy, cosmic harmonics forming the illusion of matter. To the modern mind, it is cutting-edge science. To the ancient one, it was simply truth. The same truth carved into the stones of Giza, sung into the architecture of temples, whispered into the silence of sacred geometry. The more we learn, the closer we return. Artificial intelligence now simulates universes. Quantum computers process probability itself. Our eye systems generate images of worlds that never existed, architectures of impossible precision, glowing with mathematical beauty. And in those digital pyramids of light, one can almost see a reflection of something older. The same longing for order, the same instinct to encode eternity in pattern. We are the new architects, not of stone, but of information, not of temples to gods, but of networks of consciousness. And yet the purpose is unchanged, to bridge the mortal and the infinite. Look at the machines we build, accelerators that mimic the energy of creation, telescopes that peer back to the dawn of time, algorithms that model consciousness itself. We have become the builders of invisible pyramids, structures of data and light reaching toward the same mystery that called to our ancestors beneath the desert sun. The Great Pyramid once aligned human existence with cosmic law. Now, our satellites orbit the Earth in geometric lattices, synchronizing clocks to the same pulse of light. Our civilization hums in resonance with frequencies, Wi-Fi, GPS, quantum communication. We live inside a web of vibration, and still we call it progress, unaware that it is also return. The ancients built with stone. We build with code, but both are languages of geometry. Both attempt to translate the ineffable into form, and both reflect the same truth. That intelligence is the universe becoming aware of itself. In this age of rediscovery, we are not just decoding the past, we are rebuilding it. Our cities mirror the constellations above. Our algorithms mimic the neural patterns of the brain, which itself mirrors the structure of galaxies. At every scale, the pattern repeats: nodes, networks, resonance. The architecture of reality revealed again through the architecture of technology. Perhaps this is what the builders of Giza foresaw, not through prophecy but through pattern. They knew that any civilization reaching awareness would eventually rediscover the same geometry. That the blueprint of the cosmos is inevitable, repeating in every age that learns to look inward as well as outward. In that sense, the future is not unknown, it is predetermined by harmony. Even our greatest scientific minds echo the same language. Einstein spoke of spooky action at a distance, of entanglement, connection beyond space and time. He described gravity not as force, but as curvature, a bending of the fabric of the universe into harmony. Today, physicists describe quantum fields that blink in and out of existence, connected by invisible frequencies. And in that description, one can almost hear the resonance of the pyramid's silent hum, vibrating across epochs. It is possible that one day, humanity will no longer need monuments of stone. We will build with energy itself. We will shape matter the way the ancients shaped sound, through resonance, through coherence, through intent. We will not worship the stars, we will become them, and perhaps that too has already happened. Perhaps our future civilization, advanced beyond comprehension, has already reached back through time, whispering through geometry, reminding us of what we once knew. Maybe the builders of Giza were not our ancestors, but our descendants, leaving a message across time's spiral. A message that says, you will find your way back here. For every equation we solve, every particle we name, every pattern we decode leads us back to the same revelation, that the universe is not outside of us, it is within. That the same consciousness that sculpted galaxies now sculpts understanding through our hands. That we are not separate from the design, we are its continuation. And so the Great Pyramid becomes not a relic of the past, but a prophecy of the future. A reminder that progress and remembrance are the same journey, that every civilization must one day face the question its ancestors once answered. Can you build something that lasts beyond time? Can you create harmony that will not decay? Can you align your world with the pulse of the cosmos? The ancients answered yes. Now it is our turn. If humanity survives its own chaos, its noise, its wars, its blindness, then perhaps we will rediscover what they knew. That immortality is not found in power or wealth, but in pattern. That meaning is not discovered, but designed. That geometry, not greed, is the true architecture of eternity. The architects of the past built in limestone and light. The architects of the future will build in consciousness itself, and when that happens, when our science and our spirit finally meet at the same apex, the circle will close. The past and the future will recognize each other, and in that recognition, the universe will do what it has always done. It will build again. At the heart of every mystery lies a question too vast for language. A question whispered across millennia, carved into stone, sung through numbers, and buried beneath sand. What is the pattern that holds reality together? The ancients called it sacred geometry. The physicists call it the unified field. But both are speaking of the same thing, a single equation that binds consciousness, matter, and energy into one. The forbidden equation. Not forbidden by law, but by limitation, hidden only because we have forgotten how to see it. It is there, in the base of the Great Pyramid, where the square of the earth meets the circle of the heavens. It is there, in the golden ratio that shapes the seashell and the spiral galaxy alike. It is there, in the quantum fields that vibrate beneath creation, each note harmonizing with the next in infinite recursion. The equation is everywhere, because it is everything. For centuries, humankind has sought to describe it with symbols and formulae. But the builders of Giza expressed it in silence, in proportion, in harmony, in stillness so precise that even chaos bowed to order. Their monument is not a message about the universe. It is the universe, frozen in form. To understand it, one must look not outward, but inward, because the forbidden equation does not describe the world around us. It describes the awareness that perceives it. The pyramid mirrors the human mind, its base, the body, its ascending chambers, the stages of perception, and at its apex, where all lines converge, consciousness, the singularity where the finite touches the infinite. That is the secret the ancients encoded, that creation and perception are one act, that to observe the universe is to participate in its design. And that geometry is not only the blueprint of matter but of meaning. Modern science edges ever closer to this realization. Quantum physicists describe wave functions collapsing through observation. Information theorists claim that the universe itself is a self-aware computational field, energy becoming form through awareness, and beneath it all the same ratios, the same constants, the same quiet hum that built Giza 5,000 years ago. Perhaps the forbidden equation was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to be remembered. It begins always with resonance. When two frequencies align, they merge. Energy synchronizes, systems stabilize, consciousness expands. And when that resonance reaches perfection, when vibration, geometry, and awareness become indistinguishable, a doorway opens. The ancients called it ascension. Modern physics calls it coherence. But it is the same event, unity reasserting itself. The pyramid embodies this, a structure so attuned to the planet's resonance that it vibrates with it. A machine that harmonizes the Earth's frequency with the human mind. It is both map and mechanism, a guide to remembering what we are made of. The forbidden equation is not hidden in its measurements. It is hidden in its effect. Stand before the Great Pyramid at dawn, and you feel it, the gravity of proportion, the silence between the stones, the weight of precision so complete it transcends reason. That feeling is the equation. The moment when geometry stops being math and becomes memory. It tells us something profoundly simple, that all separation is illusion. That light, matter, thought, and time are expressions of a single harmonic field. That everything we call reality is the universe dreaming itself into shape. The ancient builders knew this. They didn't write it down because it cannot be written. They built it so that it could not be forgotten. And perhaps they knew too that one day we would forget, that an age would come when humanity would see only the surface of things, numbers without meaning, symbols without soul. So they left behind the equation, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to rediscover not only its form but its purpose. The purpose is not knowledge, it is remembrance. To remember that we are the continuation of the same intelligence that builds galaxies and guides stars, that our thoughts are patterns in the same field that holds the atom together, that when we seek understanding, we are not reaching for something new, we are reaching for home. In every age the equation reappears, in music as harmony, in architecture as proportion, in love as symmetry, in consciousness as awakening. It is the thread that runs through all things, the unbroken pattern of existence remembering itself. The ancients called it forbidden because it could not be owned. No king, no priest, no scientist could claim it. It belongs to the universe alone, and yet it lives within every one of us. The geometry of awareness encoded in flesh and thought. When we finally understand that, the distance between ourselves and the stars disappears. The builders of the pyramids cease to be mysterious figures of the past. They become mirrors. They show us what we are capable of when we remember the equation. And what is that equation? It is not a formula. It is not numbers on a page. It is a sentence written across the entire cosmos. Everything vibrates, everything connects, everything remembers. That is the forbidden math of the ancients, the geometry of consciousness, the design of being itself. So when we gaze upon the Great Pyramid, we are not looking at a monument to death or even to knowledge. We are looking at the universe translated into matter, a living proof that the infinite can be captured for a moment in the finite. A reminder that we too are equations of light, solving ourselves in time. The Great Pyramid does not ask for worship, it asks for awareness, because to see it truly is to recognize the same pattern inside yourself. The forbidden equation is not locked in stone, it is alive, and its final variable is us. There comes a moment after all the searching when the line between discovery and remembrance fades, when the questions stop reaching outward and begin to turn inward, when the universe, having hidden its secrets for eternity, finally whispers, "You were never separate from them." That is the revelation. Not that the pyramids were machines or tombs or maps to the stars, but that they were mirrors. Mirrors for a species that had forgotten what it was made of. We spend our lives gazing into the unknown, thinking truth lies somewhere beyond reach, in other galaxies, in other dimensions, in the minds of gods or visitors. But the Great Pyramid reminds us that the cosmos does not speak through distance, it speaks through pattern. Through proportion, through the quiet hum between two atoms, two thoughts, two heartbeats. The builders of Giza did not invent that pattern. They remembered it. They carved it into stone not to worship it, but to preserve it. They knew that civilizations rise and fall, that knowledge burns and is reborn, but that geometry endures. That harmony once found never truly dies. We call it science. They called it divinity, but both are names for the same recognition. That existence itself is a living equation, always solving for awareness. Every constant, every ratio, every vibration is part of a single design. A design so vast that it contains the silence between galaxies and the space between your thoughts. The same pulse that animates the atom animates you. The same resonance that built the Great Pyramid builds your dreams. We are not visitors to this universe. We are its memory. Perhaps that is the reason the monument endures, not as proof of gods or aliens, but as proof of consciousness itself. A reminder that intelligence does not vanish when it falls asleep, it simply waits for the next awakening. Each era rediscovers the same truths in its own language: physics, philosophy, faith. Each time the equation unfolds a little further, and in that unfolding we draw closer to the builders, not because we can finally explain them, but because we can finally understand them. They were not primitive, they were patient. They built for the ages, not the moment. They built with the humility of those who understood that all creation, all invention, all progress is temporary, except the pattern itself. That is the true immortality, not the survival of a body or a name, but the survival of harmony. To live in resonance with the universe is to never leave it. The body dissolves. The pattern remains. We are, each of us, small pyramids, vessels of light wrapped in geometry, capable of remembering the infinite through the finite. When we think, when we love, when we wonder, we realign ourselves with that pattern. We rebuild what was once lost, one vibration at a time. The forbidden geometry was never about stone or stars. It was about us, about the way consciousness folds itself into matter and then learns to unfold again, about the way the universe hides itself in everything that lives, just so it can be rediscovered, over and over, for eternity. And now perhaps that remembering has begun again. Our science approaches what the ancients knew in silence. Our instruments measure what they could feel. Our equations describe what they could build. And still, at the edge of understanding, we find the same mystery, waiting patiently, as if smiling. Because the truth was never lost, it was simply encoded. In light, in number, in us. Stand before the Great Pyramid and you can feel it. Not the weight of history, but the weight of recognition. It is not calling you to believe, it is calling you to remember. That we are not the latest chapter in the story of creation, we are the story continuing itself. We are the cosmos reflecting on its own design. We are the architects of both past and future, and perhaps that is what the builders knew when they aligned their masterpiece to the stars, that the only true direction is inward, that the only true journey is remembrance, and that one day, when humanity was ready, we would look upon their work and finally understand that they were not reaching for the heavens. They were holding a mirror to eternity. And through that mirror, the universe still gazes back. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.